Hello, welcome back. The disembodied voice you hear is me, Mike, KG4VDK. Doing a quick little video on how to do a backup and a restore in arcOS. In the new Crater Lake version, we have the ability to do backups and restorations from those backups so that in the event maybe you have a second or third or fourth USB drive that you would like to have the same arcOS set up on, you could take a backup in one that's already set up and then restore that onto another stick. Or in the event that maybe you have a USB drive failure, you grab a new USB stick, throw your ISO on it, and then you can restore from the backup and be right back where you were. The backup and restore tool is not designed to be a migration tool between arcOS versions. It is designed to be kind of a catastrophic failure recovery tool, or like I said, to be able to spin up another stick with the exact same setup that you already have on the one you're already on. First, I'd like to kind of discuss what goes in the backup. So first, we're going to talk about the arcOS file system structure handily. This is partially at least covered in the field manual. So let's take a look at the persistent storage section. Archive. That's what we're talking about here. It used to be called arcOS data, and then a wild idea that it should have a cooler name came along. And since it is persistent storage and therefore an archive, it's the archive, haha. But that is where persistent things live. So here we go. We've got archive, and inside archive, you'll find a downloads directory that is common to all users. So anything that gets downloaded from like a web browser or something that goes here, that is persistent, and any user that downloads anything, that's where that would go. Then the QRV directory. This is where your offline maps live. This is where system level logs would live. If you grab a HamRS app image, that's where the logs for that would live. And then your call sign, or if there's multiple people using this arcOS stick, it would have multiple call signs here, but here's mine. Inside your call sign directory, you'll find by default a logs directory. Those would be your logs, so you'd have a different HamRS instance that would be your logs only, not system level. The save directory, this is where your QRV profiles live. And then all of any saved configs and anything that the core modules use to keep things persistent. Like for instance, in Firefox, there's a Mozilla FS. That stands for Mozilla File System. This is how Firefox is able to remember bookmarks that you've saved, and your browsing history, and any passwords you've saved in your Firefox usage. Same kind of thing for Thunderbird. That links all that stuff in so that you have your regular internet email is persistent. Wallpapers is an optional thing. If that's something that you're into, maybe you just don't like the picture that I've selected for the wallpaper, or you've just got something else you'd rather have. I kind of prefer to have a subdued version of the wallpaper. So if you notice, this is just black and white. It's because I took the image that was here, I ran it through GIMP and told it that I would like it to be just black and white, and that's what I like. So there it is. If you just name it wallpaper.jpg, that will become your wallpaper. If you would prefer to have a slideshow of images, you can create a directory here called slideshow. If wallpaper.jpg doesn't exist, but this slideshow directory does exist, the wallpapers in the slideshow directory would be what gets deployed, and you'd run through those images as a slideshow. But arcOS Linux modules is the other thing that would already be in your call sign directory. Core modules, community modules, if you want to use them, they're usually the ones that I've created that are in there have a README that'll show you how to activate those if you'd like to. And then here is user modules. These are the user modules that I have in place that get deployed every time I boot up. So that I have custom icons. For my ADSB, I have one that I've written specifically for me that actually lets my ADSB, that PyAware, be a feeder. It goes to FlightAware, so it actually is doing work and submitting that data back to FlightAware, which, if you want to get into that, FlightAware has a subscription, a fee-based subscription that's like $100 a month. But if you set up a feeder, that is free to use, and you then have access to all the FlightAware online data that you could dig through if that's something you're into. I occasionally use a Tor browser, so I have that set up where I can have a Tor browser available to me. I have a couple things that auto start. I have HexChat that auto starts for me, and I also auto start the desktop sharing. So if you notice this little icon down here by the IP address, that says that I've got remote desktop sharing enabled, and that was also a notification that popped up when I booted up this time. Mind test, this is just because I sometimes need something to goof around with. That's an open source version of Minecraft that I can play around with on here, and I'm kind of tinkering with some ideas where we might be able to use a Minecraft-like environment to do some like EmComm testing and preparations, where you have a fictional online town that might need resources, and we can play around with that. So just something to play around with. Band conditions conky and a weather radar conky. These both show up over here. Those are both available as community modules, as are custom icons. And then occasionally, if you're referencing YouTube videos for how you find out how to do things, it might be wise to consider a way to have those videos available to you offline. YTDLP is a YouTube downloading utility. It can work on other video sites or music sites, however many they support. But I have a little user module that installs and keeps up to date YTDLP so that I can pull down videos should I need to. That's about it for what's in the call sign directory, but I also have documents. So everything that's in my call sign directory would eventually be a part of a backup when I take one. So I have manuals for not only radios that I own, but I have manuals for some of the more common things and radios that some of my friends have, just in case we ever end up somewhere and it's one of those, we need to read the manual, hope we have a copy. And then a copy of my license, and I run a DigiNet weekly, so I do some DigiNet challenges. Those live there. But everything in the call sign directory would be backed up in a backup when we take one. The other things that would get backed up, let's go back into QRV. I hit Control H to show hidden files here. When arcOS first boots, one of the things it does is look to see if this .packages directory exists. If it exists, any deb files that live in here get installed automatically if they're not already installed. So maybe it's the second time station setup has been run. The system's already been booted, but we've run station setup for a second time. These packages would be recognized as already installed, and we're not going to waste time installing them again. But if they're not already installed, they get installed. So that's how I get mine test installed, and then local send, if there's some file sharing that somebody else is using local send instead of Warpinator, I do have that available here as well. At the archive level, when we're looking at the hidden files here, things that would get included in the backup would be your arcOS keys. If those exist, they get backed up. The operators directory is when that select operator window pops up at first boot and it has your call sign already displayed. This is how it knows how to pre-populate what you already had in there. So any operator that's already created their station setup or run through station setup on here would have a file here and would show up in that drop down menu for select operator. Once you get everything set up the way you like it, you may want to just be able to skip the station setup, the select operator and station setup. Just you want to be able to hit the power button on your machine and then have it just come up and be ready for you. If that's something that you're into, the Autoconfig file. So essentially, all this file is if you jumped into the operators directory, copy your call signs config file, and then paste it into archive and rename it .autoconfig. We will now skip select operator, and station setup would be automatically filled out, and you wouldn't even have to hit the OK button. It just flies past that and configures it automatically with whatever is in this file. So that's the things that would get pulled into the backup. So let's go ahead and take a backup to see what actually gets pulled in there and how that works. So I've got everything set up the way I like it. I'll go into arcOS Tools, Backup Operator. One of the things that the Backup Operator script does is it will kill any processes that are running. You'll notice that my little post-it note has disappeared. Any processes, any of the persistently managed by core modules software that is actually running at the time you go to start a backup will be killed, just to make sure that there are no config changes or files being written to that could be changing at the time the backup is being taken. So notice here you're going to select a backup location. Heads up, if possible, select a backup location that's not your arcOS USB drive, because having a backup on the device that you're creating a backup of kind of means you don't have a backup. If that USB drive fails and that's where the backup lived, you've got nothing to work with. So I'm going to plug in my backup USB. All right, and then I'll select OK. The backup starts. We get a little message up here that tells us what is in the backup file, what's not in the backup file. That will eventually disappear if you didn't get a chance to read it. Come down here to the little bell icon. You can click on it and see that it included .station info from archive, the operators directory with your particular call signs information. Everything, that's what the little asterisk here means, called a wildcard. Everything in my call sign directory gets backed up. The system level logs, if there were any there, they would be backed up. .packages, if you have any packages there, it gets backed up. And if there are keys on board, it gets backed up. Heads up, any offline maps that you've downloaded in Yak and or Viking, they are not included in this backup. That is because that directory can get quite large depending on how many maps you like to have on board. So I recommend that you back those up manually. You can see here on my backup USB that I just have another directory with offline maps, so I can drag those back over into my system after a restore. Once that backup completes, it lets you know the name of that backup file, how big it is, and when that backup was taken. If you have user modules that you're already using, those user modules are in the backup in the arcOS Linux modules directory in the backup, but they're also backed up separately into their own backup file. So you have user modules separate from your backup in case you need to get to them later for some reason. So now let's take a look in that directory. So I've got my backup file, I've got my user module backup, and I can now, if I want to, boot into another arcOS USB that's never been booted before and do a restoration, and I can have this exact same system up and running in moments without having to reconfigure everything. I just restore from this backup, and that second stick is now exactly like my other stick. So I do have another stick ready to go. I'm gonna shut down this system. We'll boot back into that one, and then we'll come back up and do a restoration to show how that works. So stand by and we'll be right back. All right, so here we are booted up into a brand new, fresh Crater Lake arcOS USB stick. I'm gonna do a restore from backup. So what I need to do is, instead of select operator and add new, I'm gonna do restore from backup, hit OK, and we get a little window that tells us to drag our backup file here. So I'm gonna go ahead and plug in my backup USB drive where my backup file lives. And then browse to that backup file location. So one that ends in .backup, and then just drag it right here. Go ahead and kill this window. It goes through restoring all those files. And then because I had persistent packages that were part of my backup, it runs through the installing persistent packages. And then I'm dropped into station setup, where it somehow now remembers who I am. And that's because it had the files there from the .operator directory. That's how we know who I am again. Now, I had Autoconfig set up in my other stick. Autoconfig is not something that gets pulled over in the restoration process. Just redo that by copying that file again to .autoconfig if that's something you want to reset up. But I can just hit OK. It goes ahead and unlocks it, deploys my modules. Now we see that my background has changed to my black and white version that was part of my backup. The rest of the modules get deployed. Takes it a little while longer the first time when you're doing a restore than it does on a subsequent boot. But not too much longer. So give it just a few seconds. It gets finished up. I get my notes back. I'm going to go ahead and tell it that I already took a backup now. And now, momentarily, we get our user modules have run. So I have my weather radar conky and my band conditions conky. And I have successfully restored from a backup. And I'm right back where I started. If you notice here in the uptime section of the station info, it's currently at 4 minutes and 15 seconds. I actually took about, I don't know, 2 minutes just sitting here getting ready to record this video. So normally, if you're just doing a restore and not trying to record videos while you're doing it, you can be restored back to your known good state from your backup in under 2 minutes. arcOS focuses on giving you a reliable system that just works, that you can recover from quickly. And I think we're in a place now where that is something that is real. I am able to blitz my system and be back up and running in well under 10 minutes. If I already have a backup USB that has arcOS on it, I mean, it's as simple as pulling one out, putting the second one in, and rebooting. If I need to restore from a backup, like I said, you're in here with 5 minutes tops. I will challenge anyone out there to beat that in something like 7.3 Linux or EmComm Tools to get back up and running in a known good state that quickly. So that's how a restore works. And it really is that easy. So hopefully, now that you've got some time under your belt using arcOS, you've got things configured the way you like them. Now you know how you can just get back up and running really quickly with a backup and then the restore process. So hopefully that helps you figure out how to make your system even more resilient. And I hope you enjoy this feature, because I think it was an important one that was long overdue. So enjoy it, and I will talk to you later. Have a good rest of your day.